Okay, I'm gonna admit everyone.
Yeah.
So you can get started now.
Okay. Hare Krishna, everyone. Nice to be back. Today we're going to cover chapter 17. So, a little summary before we begin as to the what this chapter is trying to, teach us. So, we're hearing a lot about Parikshit Maharaj, isn't it? So, one of the names of Parikshit was Vishnu Ratha, which means that he was always protected by the Lord, even when he was in the womb. So this we're going to hear about this wonderful person who is the grandson of Arjuna, and all the characteristics and qualities that was predicted was manifested in him. When his grandfather, uncle, or you can, there's no appropriate, you know, name in terms of relationships in English. So we can call him his great uncle, maybe, retired from being the king. When he retired from being the king, then he installed Parikshit as king. He was already mature in age and ability. Just as Krishna left the planet, the age of Kali manifested his presence. Kali Yuga began means the age of quarrel, where everything is very difficult. Ignorance takes over from knowledge. Pride takes over from humility. Today when someone has money, he's honored like in the same way, like in previous ages when people had knowledge. So results of Kali are that people are breaking down all barriers of what was considered proper and not proper. Why should one be limited? People feel. What is the mood in Kali Yuga? Why should one be limited by rules, by the practices of the past? No, we should be free to live our life and get pleasure with any way we feel. And in this way, people get more and more miserable. And we can see how in Kali Yuga, every relationship is out for exploitation. People are only interested in money. Everyone desires more and more money so that they can enjoy more and more. There's a price for everything. So many facilities for misery in the name of advancement that everyone is simply quarreling. So this personality called Kali, he started doing his business. And when Parikshit heard that the symptoms had manifested in his kingdom, he went out to find him where he had manifested and to kill him. Now, what type of character do we want to see in a ruler? This is what we learn from this chapter, and how such a person deals with nefarious forces. So Maharaj Parikshit was such a person, and Krishna wanted to establish such a person as king, like in the war of Mahabharata, in the story of the Pandavas, how he took such great pains to establish Yudhishthir on the throne. Right? Why? Because society depends on government. Good government means people flourish and there's no anxiety. The king has to see that the material management is going on well. And Krishna wanted such a king on the throne because then people can, practice spiritual life. And when he retired, when Yudhishthira Maharaj retired, he put Parikshit Maharaj on the throne. So Parikshit Maharaj was not an ordinary person. He was carrying the ruling potency of Krishna. Because why? Because he only wanted to give to please Krishna. He was a servant of Krishna and took the position simply to act as a servant. In other words, he was governing on behalf of Krishna. So, chapter 17 is called Punishment and Reward of Kali. It talks about how Parikshit dealt with Kali. He arrived, and when he arrived near Kali, he saw the pitiful condition of the cow and the unhappy condition of the bull. Because in the last chapter, we heard how he wanted to go around the kingdom and see, not to conquer or to punish, but to see if people were happy, right? And so while he was doing that, you may remember the last chapter, he heard from people the glories of his forefathers. And then in the meantime, while he was doing that, the cow and the bull had met, and they were inquiring from each other as to why they were so sad, right? So then, now in this chapter, Parikshit Maharaj comes upon these two, and he actually sees the pitiful condition of the cow and the unhappy condition of the bull, the personification of religiosity. Kali was beating their legs, causing them to suffer. So in this chapter, in the first 3 verses, we really get to see the primal symptoms of Kali, how it works its way in the fighting atmosphere. So Parikshit Maharaj, he observed that a lower class person who had no integrity, not dedicated to following the religious principles, but dressed like a king, as if he was a king, he was wearing garments of embroidered gold. Right? But of course, we can't judge people by their clothes. Prabhupada says how it is the heart which needs to be trained, as in chivalry, trained in weapons. And such a Kshatriya will risk his life immediately to save someone. Not like what we see today, people will sit in their offices and they allow the poor soldiers to kill themselves, to get killed. Right? Now you can imagine what kind of mood would be in a country like that, with a ruler like that, who's feeling, and a devoted ruler. He's also feeling. He's so protective of the citizens. His mood is that if you harm even one hair on any one of our citizens, there will be war. So the idea really is that the king's business is to protect the citizen from thieves, robbers. The heart is noble, ferocious when required. And so the dress of the king was not going to help, because Pariksha Maharaj could see through it. Right? So in our first slide, there's 3 verses that covers the symptoms of Kali Yuga, which are very important verses. So I'm going to begin by reading these 3 verses and talking a little bit about that. So Sutta Goswami said, after reaching that place, Maharaj Parikshit observed that a lower caste Sudra, dressed like a king, was beating a cow and a bull with a club, as if they had no owner. The bull was as white as a white lotus flower. He was terrified of the Shudra who was beating him. He was so afraid that he was standing on one leg, trembling and urinating. Although the cow is beneficial because one can draw religious principles from her, she was now rendered poor and calfless. Her legs were being beaten by a Shudra. There were tears in her eyes, and she was distressed and weak. She was hankering after some grass in the field. So the bull is being described as white as a white lotus flower because he was representing Dharma. And Dharma is pure, is white. So what is this? Now the first point that's described as a symptom of Kali Yuga is bad rulers, improper rulers, who don't know what the goal is like. They don't know how to rule. Religiosity gets beaten, and another symptom is that states become secular and pseudo religion comes out. Of course, it means also that the authority is ruined of leadership. Then the second one is that with such a ruler, then the citizens become skeptical of religion. And then they feel that they can do whatever they like. Every man becomes his own authority. And they're not qualified. Right? And the third symptom is that although the cow is beneficial, she's now left unprotected, calfless. She's taken away. Her legs are beaten by such people. They are distressed and weak, and she's hankering after some grass. So we see that today, right? How the cow is treated as a factory, first as milk, and then meat. They pump the cow with antibiotics, artificial hormones. Even the milk turns into poison. Right? But actually, not that they are just getting the diseases that come from that, but also the heavy reactions and the sufferings. Why? Because the cows are very innocent, so motherly, homely. They're helpless, and it's very heartless. It's very cruel and inhuman to kill them. So there's 3 points: the bad ruler, irreligious principles due to that bad ruler, and cow protection is finished. And that's why we see slaughterhouses. And when a real king comes across this, the authority, a good authority with a fierce mood, like we see in Parikshit Maharaj, he had a voice like sounded like thunder, and he immediately confronted Kali. So he understood his duty, right? And he's chastising them and chastising Kali and saying that, do you think that the Pandavas are not here on the planet and no one can uphold their principles? And then he turns around and he placates the bull. And he's asking him again and again, who has done this to you? So in our next slide, we're going to discuss how Parikshit Maharaj addresses Kali with anger, and he understands the value of the cow and the bull. Very interesting. Parikshit Maharaj, well equipped with arrows and bow and seated on a gold-embossed chariot, spoke to him, the Shudra, with a deep voice sounding like thunder. Who are you? You appear to be strong, and yet you dare kill, within my protection, those who are helpless. By your dress, you pose yourself to be a godly king. But by your deeds, you are opposing the principles of the twice-born Kshatriyas. You rogue, do you dare beat an innocent cow because Lord Krishna and Arjuna, the carrier of the Gandiva bow, are out of sight? Since you are beating the innocent in a secluded place, you are considered a culprit and therefore deserve to be killed. So Prabhupada writes a short purport, very interesting. Cage of Kali take advantage of this lawless kingdom and arrange to kill innocent animals like the cow in a secluded slaughterhouse. Such murderers of animals stand to be condemned by death by the order of a pious king like Maharaj Pariksha. So for a pious king, the culprit who kills an animal in a secluded place is punishable by the death penalty, exactly like a murderer who kills an innocent child in a secluded place. Text 7. Now for the first time in kingdom, well protected by the arms of the kings of the Kuru dynasty, I see you grieving with tears in your eyes. Up till now, no one on earth has ever shed tears because of royal negligence. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, the protection of the life of both the human beings and the animals is the first and foremost duty of a government. A government must not discriminate in such principles. Then in the next slide, Parikshit Maharaj explains the duty of government. He says, O chaste one, the king's good name, duration of life, and good rebirth vanish when all kinds of living beings are terrified by miscreants in his kingdom. It is certainly the prime duty of the king to subdue first the sufferings of those who suffer. Therefore, I must kill this most wretched man because he's violent against other living beings. So Prabhupada writes in the purport how, when there's disturbance, especially in India, we see this, or sometimes even in America, where a wild animal gets into a village or a town, and immediately the law enforcement has to take action and kill them because they're so careful. They're going to come and kill the people. The wild animals will attack some people. So in the same way, it is the duty of the government to kill all bad social elements such as thieves, dacoits, and murderers, because that punishment is good for them. It takes away all the karma that they get from doing that horrible things, right? And he's talking about how the same punishment is also due to animal killers, because animals are also citizens. That's the point that he's making, is that anyone who takes birth in a state, and that includes both men and animals, they are citizens. And he has a right to be protected and to live under the protection of the ruler. In other words, even the jungle animals are also subject to the king because they have a right to kill. So what to speak of domestic animals, Prabhupada is saying, like the cows and the bulls. Of course, Prabhupada, these purports are very, very strongly, worded, because Prabhupada feels that it's very important. And a ruler who doesn't protect animals, ultimately there's very severe reaction, because Krishna doesn't take it lightly. Because Krishna, they are all sons of God, Prabhupada writes, and no one has any right to kill another animal unless he is ordered by the course of natural law. In other words, a tiger can kill a lower animal for his food, but a man cannot kill an animal for his subsistence. So what do the man is because so what does man eat then? So that the scriptures direct that one should eat only by eating specific living beings as ordained by the law of God. And for humans, is ordained that one live on grains, fruits, and milk that's provided. And then, of course, he speaks very strongly about slaughterhouses, that we've heard many times. Prabhupada speak against it. Okay, so in our next slide, King Parikshit questions Dharma, the bull. And these are verses 12 to 16, where he's asking him that, why are you unhappy? You're so honest. You're so offenseless. Please, please tell me who has done this to you. And then he reiterates that anyone who gives pain to offenseless living beings, he must fear me, Parikshit Maharaj says. An upstart living being who commits offenses by torturing those who are offenseless shall be directly uprooted by me, even though he be a denizen of heaven with armor and decorations. And then he reiterates again that how the duty of a king is to give protection to all. Then immediately after stopping Kali, Parikshit turns his attention, of course, which we just saw, to the bull, right? He's feeling very horrible. And he's telling him repeatedly not to cry and to feel assured that he will protect him. So this is very interesting that he's asking him, who is the perpetrator? Who is the one who has caused so much harm to him? And the bull, in order to give that information, he has to feel secure in his ability to take care of that perpetrator, right? So Parikshit Maharaj, why is he saying this repeatedly, that you can have faith in me? Is because he wants bull not to be afraid, and to tell him, because he's totally capable of taking care of that. So here we'll see what in our next slide, what the Dharma, the bull, replies. Okay, so the bull now is feeling very assured that here is somebody who can take care of this Kali, and so therefore he can speak freely. But yet we see what his reply is. Okay, so he's not going to give the name, the person. He's not going to blame anybody. He's saying, "Oh, greatest among human beings, it is very difficult to ascertain the particular miscreant who has caused our sufferings, because we are bewildered by all the different opinions of theoretical philosophers." So there's 6 kinds of philosophers, Prabhupada explains, So, and what are they, all different things they are saying? Some are saying our own self is responsible for personal happiness or distress. So, and that means that when one is thinking, one's own self is responsible, which means that basically I am the doer, right? So Prabhupada says that how this idea, this philosophy that I am responsible, I am the supreme. Of course, we are responsible if we do something bad, but if somebody else does something to us, then we have to consider that ultimately where is it coming from. But to think that I am the doer is very akin, similar to the Prabhupada saying, is to the atheist who says there's no God and I'm everything. So it's really an atheistic point of view. Right? So all these 6 philosophies are atheistic. And Dharma is going to point that out. Why? Because he's master of all these different opinions. But at heart, he knows what is the ultimate reason, who is actually the doer. Yeah? And in Kali Yuga, Prabhupada writes, so many people are bewildered by these philosophies. Then there's another philosophy which says that superhuman powers are responsible. In other words, the demigods. Others think that this is karma, just getting back what we deserve. In other words, even karma, if we are just simply getting reaction. It really doesn't recognize any higher power. It's just that, whatever it still promotes the idea that, that you are the doer, right? And then the gross materialist maintain that my natural tendency is this, and so I can do what I want to, and nothing can be done about it. Others say, Prabhupada writes in the last verse of this section, that some thinkers, they say that the dealings of the world, they're too deep and no one can speak about it. So you should not speak about it. No one knows the cause of it. Others think that it's an unstoppable fate. And as soon as Pariksha Maharaj hears these 6 different reasons that Dharma is giving as to not identifying the cause, immediately he understands that this is not an ordinary bull. He's religious personified. So now here, in our next slide, we're going to hear about who is really the person behind why something happens. Nothing can happen without Krishna's sanction. So text 22, verses 22 and 23, the purports are very important. And Prabhupada explains in these purports that how so many things are happening to us, some good, some bad, some mediocre, and we think of them as our enemies. Right? And so it's very important to really understand who is it. Because if we identify the person who has done something to me, then I'm also implicated in the sin. Because we are thinking how he should be punished. So we get implicated in further reaction. So in other words, we this cycle, when you strike back that he's my enemy, he's going to try to get even with us, right? With me, and so on. And so this goes on for hundreds of births. So there's no end to this cycle. So that's why it's considered that one becomes equally a sinner, because one simply prolongs this cycle. Why? Because when you hate something, your mind meditates on that. And the more you meditate, you just become like that. It's described in the Srimad Bhagavatam that there's a certain type of wasp that captures an insect and puts it within a hole. Now that insect is always afraid. He's thinking, when will the wasp come? When will the wasp come? And then he becomes the wasp, even in the same life. So when we think of someone as our enemy, the very qualities we don't like to obtain, and it's true, this is how the mind works. So in our next slide, we're going to hear who is to blame then. If I'm not going to blame the person who actually did this to me, then who is to blame? So there's actually 2 levels of understanding. Prabhupada explains in the purport of verse 23. One is that one level is that Krishna's material energy is working, and the person who's doing it is actually the doer, beating us with a stick. And this is the level we mostly operate on, right? And this is the practical level. In other words, we have to act practically because it is Krishna's Maya Shakti. And we have to take some action maybe. Right? But on the deepest level of our devotion, we should know that Krishna is the ultimate controller, and there's mercy coming. So, in other words, the practical side may force us to stay away from that person, maybe, or try to inform the authorities for that person's benefit. So it's on the practical level, right? And it's because we understand that it's Krishna's Maya Shakti, and so therefore the material energy is working, and therefore we need to take some action. But he's saying the same devotee should understand on a deeper level that we should know that Krishna is the ultimate controller and it's his mercy. And this is something really wonderful. Why we don't see it like that? Why don't we see Krishna in this? And why we only want to operate on the practical level and blame others is that material energy is so good, it's always giving us doubts. And thus we refrain from understanding this. In other words, we come under Maya. This doubt is also there, Prabhupada writes, in Satya Yuga. But what Kali Yuga does, it magnifies everything. The material energy in Kali Yuga intensifies the lower modes of material nature. Prabhupada writes how these points are very essential to understand if you want to advance. To understand the amount of work that Kali Yuga does to delude everyone, how it undermines every sense of authority, attaches everyone to the bodily concept of life, and the covering becomes so thick that people feel hopeless and they get mad and madder, further and further insane. Of course, this is Kali Yuga, and with Prabhupada writes, with no Pariksha Maharaj, and how fortunate we are that we have Lord Chaitanya. He has come in this Yuga to guide us. So the question is, what will Pariksha do now? Pariksha Maharaj do now? Is he going to kill him, cut off his arms? So in other words, how to act in Kali Yuga, where everything is upside down, all these things. So Prabhupada goes on further to explain how, Kali, again and again, he talks about the symptoms of Kali Yuga. And he keeps on emphasizing that point, how in Kali Yuga, no one trusts the rulers, right? So, but really, when you think about it, what was Prabhupada mostly against? Among the science, among the scientific points of view, what was he mostly against? And it was Darwin. Why? Because the Darwin theory of evolution is basically showing which way we are progressing. So who knows more? If the next generation is better than the last one, so who knows more, right? Parents are you or your children. This is what they teach in school. The parents don't know how to work all these, latest things, the CD-ROM and all these things, right? So they could not be better, right? On every level, every act of Kali corrupts authority. And that's why we see the Sudra dressed as king. And therefore, there's no order in society. And of course, the rulers themselves are no good authority. If you follow them, Prabhupada writes, you're damned. And if you don't follow them, you're damned, right? So why? Because Kali's duty is to take us further away from Krishna. That's her duty. Why should I serve anybody? Why should I serve Krishna? So people in general, they're innocent, but due to bad education, bad propaganda, and bad principles, the innocent become diverted into such kind of demoniac thought. With right association, he will be proper. Of course, a demoniac person will be horrible all the way through because that's just with him, right? That nature. But an innocent person with right association will be good. So in other words, we have to be very careful with this mind, right? How we see things. And we see that in Dharma, how he's not willing to blame anybody. So we go on to the next slide. The one interesting point that I forgot. So why Dharma being, the question rises is that Dharma being such a great devotee of the Lord, why is he not, identifying, why is he not saying that Krishna is the ultimate cause? In other words, he's the indirect doer, because ultimately nothing can happen without Krishna's sanction. So Prabhupada answers that by saying that he was forgetful in yoga. It was Krishna's yoga maya that did not allow him to say that. Why? Because Prabhupada, Krishna wants to make that point very clear that that the sufferings of the bull and cow was planned by Krishna to show that Parikshit Maharaj was an ideal king. That he was an ideal king. How he protected the cow and the bull and the brahmanas and the two pillars of advancement in material life. In other words, Dharma knew that Krishna is the cause, but Krishna allowed him to forget so that he could depict the greatness of Parikshit Maharaj, how he was an ideal king, and how he understood this as being the plan of the Lord, so that Kali Yuga could enter. So in our next slide, we're going to discuss the 4 pillars of sinful life: intoxication, illicit sex, meat eating, and gambling. And these are the 4 principles, Prabhupada writes, that the society should run upon. Now, they are not the goal of religion, but when the society is developed on these principles, love of Krishna naturally develops in the citizens. In other words, this is not what will, by doing these 4 things, is not the answer to getting Krishna, getting to a goal of life, which is Krishna consciousness, but they help. Because if the ruler makes sure that these principles are being followed in a society, then love of Krishna naturally develops. And that is why Parikshit Maharaj was so adamant in giving punishment to Kali, because he understood that these 4 principles must be there. Must be there. So Prabhupada writes in the purport, how the Lord himself also warns that the deluding power of material energy is too powerful to overcome. But one who completely surrenders unto the Lord can easily do so. But to surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord is not very easy. Such surrender is possible by persons of austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. These 4 principles of advanced civilization were remarkable features in the age of Kali Yuga, or in the age of Sati Yuga, where every human being was practically a qualified Brahmana of the highest order. They were almost, Prabhupada writes, how they were almost Paramahansas, or the topmost in renounced order. But as Kali Yuga progressed, the basic principles of Brahmanical culture, which means all these 4 principles, became curtailed. And proportionate development of pride, attachment for women, and intoxication, the path of salvation, or the path of transcendental bliss, retreated far, far away from human society. And Prabhupada is writing how with the progression of the age of Kali, people are becoming very proud and attached to women and intoxication. By the influence of the age of Kali, even a pauper is proud of his penny. So in this way, Prabhupada explains many symptoms of today versus what was in previous yugas. In Sati Yuga, how these 4 principles, they were like a backbone, the foundation of being of Krishna consciousness. That's why Prabhupada gave us so mercifully the 4 regulative principles, because they help a person to come to the platform or mode of goodness, which becomes like a springboard for practicing Krishna consciousness. So in our next slide, Parikshit Maharaj sympathizes with Mother Earth, the cow. So he turns his attention now to the cow. And he mentions, and he tells the Mother Earth that how she was experiencing all these troubles because Krishna had gone away. When Krishna had graced the earth by his lotus feet, she was feeling protected. And now with Krishna gone, she's being exploited by low-class personalities. And what are they doing? They are exploiting natural resources, and no one likes to be exploited. But this is the symptom of this age. So in our next slide, Kali surrenders and trembles in fear. Because he knew, Kali knew what his nature was, and he knew that this is what he's going to do. That's what he's meant to do. This is his nature. And there's a story that Prabhupada explains in one purport of a sadhu who was going along with somebody, and he sees that he stops by at a river and he sees a scorpion drowning in the water, and so he picks up the scorpion and puts him, in a safe place, and the scorpion stings him, and then so he leaves the scorpion, of course, and then he moves on. He keeps walking, and then he stops by another place where he sees another scorpion, drowning, and so he picks up the scorpion again and places him in safety, and the scorpion stings him. And so this friend of his asks him that, why are you doing this? You know that he's going to sting you. And the sadhu says that, well, that's my nature is to give protection, and his nature is to sting. So we are both working according to our nature. So in this way, Kali understands he needs a place because that's his nature. And so he was smart enough to actually surrender to Parikshit Maharaj, because he abandons the dress of a king and he completely surrenders to him, bowing his head. And Maharaj Parikshit, who was qualified, who was such a great Kshatriya, a Kshatriya will kill if he sees a miscreant who's corrupting, everyone. But he also will immediately protect if that person surrenders, because he's at heart he's bound to give protection to those who surrender, not for his own power or anything like that, but just he's bound to give protection. This is his nature. Just like we have the story of King Shivi, where the hawk is pursuing the pigeon and wants to eat the pigeon, and the pigeon takes shelter in the lap of King Shivi. And now King Shivi is bound by his principle of giving protection to somebody who asks for protection. But the hawk is saying, no, you give, I want that meat. It's my food. He's my food. So King Shivi agrees to give his own flesh. And so it's decided that, they're going to weigh the weight of the pigeon, and he will keep cutting his flesh according to equal the weight of the pigeon, because that's what he wants to eat. And by the demigods' arrangement, because they were the one, they had incarnated as the hawk and the pigeon to test King Shivi, the pigeon kept becoming lighter and lighter, to the point that no amount of flesh would have equal the weight. So King Shivi, he himself sat on the weighing scale, and he says, now you can just kill me, eat me. And of course, at that point, the demigods showed themselves, and they were very pleased with him. So this was used to be the mood of Kshatriyas, that they would give protection. They are taken a vow to give protection to those who surrender. Okay. But then he says, then in text 33, Parikshit Maharaj says, therefore, O friend of religion, because first he acknowledges that Kali should be controlled or punished or killed, because irreligious principles like greed, falsehood, robbery, all these things will abound. Therefore, he says, my friend of irreligion, you do not deserve to remain in a place where experts performed sacrifices according to truth and religious principles for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, I'm not willing to give you a place in my kingdom, because because I'm very careful about protecting these people who follow truth and religious principles. So basically he's saying, you cannot stay in my kingdom. And so now Kali was stuck. Why was he stuck? Because Parikshit Maharaj was king of the world. So where would he go? So therefore, starting, that's why starting text 35, he becomes very fearful because he doesn't know where to go. So now in our next slide, we're going to hear where does King Parikshit give him to stay, the places that he gives him to stay. He gives him 5 places. So King Parikshit gives him 5 places to live. Sutta Goswami said, Maharaj Parikshit, thus being petitioned by the personality of Godhead, by the personality of Kali, gave him permission to reside in places where gambling, drinking, prostitution, and animal slaughter was performed. And then Kali was not pleased with that because he said he wanted something more. Why? Because there is no place under Parikshit Maharaj's rule that these things are done. Then the king gives him permission to live where there's gold. Because wherever there's gold, there's also falsity, intoxication, lust, envy, and enmity. And it's very interesting purport why gold? Because Prabhupada writes that how gold encourages falsity, intoxication, prostitution, envy, and enmity. Now, gold can be also used for a good purpose in decorating the deities. Right? And then something very interesting that children can learn about this gold standard exchange. How Prabhupada, he's in this purport, he criticizes the gold standard currency, which means that basically you're not really using gold as currency, but you're using the gold standard currency. And there's a difference there, And the reason why this started actually, because initially it was the gold that they used, right? Is because the criticism was that the gold was very, very heavy to carry. So that's how the country started using banknotes, but theoretically, they're supposed to have the equivalent amount of gold to back up the currency so that you could get gold anytime you want to exchange. So in other words, the currency, the bank currency had weight. But in Kali Yuga, the governments began cheating. So in other words, if we, we could not, if I wanted more money, right, you could not print the notes because there's no way we could print the notes. But the government could. So when the government needed more money, they simply printed money. So gradually what happened, there was twice as much more paper currency than there was gold. And so this cheating was going on till, the government needed a new project to fund, right? And they would print more. They kept printing more and more when there was the equivalent of 3-1 and then 100-1. And then they tried to switch to silver standard. And now we see that the value of the paper currency went down. Prabhupada is interesting how he writes that when he was a child, in 4 annas, which 60 paisa, he could get all, which is basically was like 4 cents. You could get all the expenses met in a whole week. So that even a poor person would live comfortably. He would have a place to live and he would have enough. So the anxiety, 90% of the anxiety was all gone. But now we see that the anxiety is going up because money has no value anymore, nothing to back it up. So Prabhupada writes how this is like a hot air balloon that keeps puffing up more and more until it pops. So therefore, he recommends sannyasis not to come in contact with these 5 places. But gold has a special value in Krishna's service. So in our last slide, we're going to talk about, Prabhupada talks about how to avoid the influence of Kali. And he gives that formula in verse 38. So very quickly, just in a few lines, he talks about how one should fast in 2 days in a month, which is Ekadashi. But because due to fasting, the state will save tons of food. It's very beneficial both materially and spiritually. And their health will improve too. And then he talks about the compulsory marriage of young boys and girls. Of course, he talks about 24 for boys and 16 for girls. And just so to prevent this illicit intimate connection between male and female, which happens unless they are properly situated in a marriage. Because we understand that this is natural at a certain age. This is bound to happen. So Prabhupada is giving a formula how to avoid that. And then in the last one, he talks about how they should give charity. Householders should give charity to preach the principles of Bhagavatam. And by doing that, naturally, there will be God consciousness everywhere. So in this way, Pariksha Maharaj re-established the 4 principles of religion, and in this way, he improved the condition of the earth. Okay, so I will stop here, and I will ask Radhika to give information on the guidebook.
Yes. Thank you so much. Share screen. Okay, Hare Krishna. Once we have discussed the chapter with our children, we are ready to move on to a comprehensive guide for young readers. Almost coming to the end of Canto 1. Just one second, I'm going to change the spotlight. Okay. So we're ready to begin chapter 17, and we of course have our story summary. When King Pariksha saw Bhumi the cow and Dharma the bull, he was horrified at what he saw. Right before his eyes he could see a very low-class evil man dressed up as a king and repeatedly beating the cow and bull. So a nice story summary that goes on. It's short and it goes on over 3 pages and has a nice illustration to summarize the entire chapter. And then we move on to the key messages. So verses are grouped according to theme and key messages. And there are 5 key themes or key messages that are in this chapter. And there's an encouragement for the child, for the student to look them up and then memorize them, discuss each one of them further. Moving on to the multiple choice questions, they're understanding the story questions, 17 of them. And there are 3 options. Bhumi Devi was in the form of a cow, bull, or calf. Dharma was in the form of a cow, bull, or calf. So the child selects the right answer. And then higher thinking questions to delve deeper into the purpose. There are 8 of them given here. And like I've shared in the past, these can be questions that the parent can use during the discussion directly from Prabhupada's Bhagavatam. So I jot these down right next to the verse that they're related with, and I'm doing my own preparation for teaching it to my children or to Sunday school, or they can be assigned as a written assignment. And somebody recently shared with me this past week from Mataji's 3rd Canto book, and she's typing them out. She's about 12, 13, and she's typing it out. She's 13 in a Google document, and she shared it with me for her feedback. She actually lives in California now, but used to be my Sunday school student. And activities, we move on to some of the arts and crafts and moving activities that bring the chapter to life. So here's one called the White Lotus. In the purport to the 2nd verse, Prabhupada says, the next symptom of the age of Kali is that principles of religion, which are all spotlessly white, like the white lotus flower, will be attacked by the uncultured population of the age. So the aim is for children to understand why the bull represents religious principles, explore religious principles, and understand and explain the comparison to the white lotus flower. So these kind of analogies are really, really important for children to be able to make those connections with the world. And, children who delve deeply into these analogies from the Bhagavatam find a lot of correlation with math and patterns and The analogies that come at you during standardized testing like SAT or ACT. So this one is a craft where the child takes white and green craft paper, pencils, scissors, and glue, and draws a lotus petal, and then cuts it out. And then there's some questions to explore the discussion further. Which animal is being compared to as white as a lotus flower? Why are the principles of religion compared to white lotus flower? And do you think it'll be easy to keep your white lotus clean? Why is the bull compared to the white lotus? So the conclusion of the discussion is the principles of religion are pure. This is why they're compared to a white lotus. And just as a speck of dust is easily seen on a white lotus, similarly, when a religious principle is attacked, it's obvious that Kali Yuga is progressing. Another activity, artistic activity, to make a wanted poster. Children really enjoy this one. There are a lot of wanted templates. Even if you wanted to just download a template, if you just go on Google and you say wanted poster, I've done this where I've just downloaded a wanted template and then continue to work with this activity, or I've done it another way where you just start from scratch. So you create a poster and try to find a picture of the personality of Kali. It's easy to find this online, or perhaps in a calendar, or in a Back to Godhead magazine. A reward, a description of the crime, additional relevant items, and make it look artistic and authentic, and help the adult burn some of the edges. You know how like in Western cowboy wanted posters, some of the edges will be burned. So this is a real fun one. Okay, several critical thinking activities to bring out the spiritual investigator in you. One is a debate. If you had the opportunity to address the government in your country with 5 recommendations, what would they be? So plan a speech to introduce your points and practice the speech, deliver it to a group of people, revise it, and then the group can play the part of the government and either accept or reject your recommendations. The other way to do this is to have 2 sides, so I have 4 students, so you split them into 2 that are offering recommendations, and then there's the president who is going to, question or come up with counter arguments. A monarchy, a nice way to lead into a unit in social studies, to study the forms of government. Conduct a project based on monarchy, which countries have kings and queens and which countries don't. And you would be surprised. I mean, we think of, just Queen Elizabeth in England, and perhaps the Saudi Arabian countries, but there are so many countries. We actually did this research, went to the library and picked out books on monarchies, and we did some research on the Google Guru. And there's so many more monarchies than we realized. I think there are like 73 current monarchies. Discuss how the position of the monarchy has changed over time. So this is a really nice discussion of discussing how Vedic monarchy compares to current day monarchy. What powers do these kings or queens have? What powers did they previously have? How has this changed, and why do you think the change took place? How and why has public opinion changed by the importance of the monarchy? Probably a very relevant discussion right now with everything that's going on with the monarchy in England, with Prince Philip's death and Prince Harry leaving the monarchy. It's a very current topic. And then, did some kings abuse? Look at Henry VIII, who even changed his religion to suit his lifestyle choices. So a nice history lesson here. Moving on to another critical thinking activity, cow's contribution. Imagine you're giving a talk about the topic cow's contribution to our community. Gather dairy items to present that are made from milk, like butter, ghee, cheese, yogurt, cream, and paneer. Research and explain how the humble cow eats grass, but in turn gives milk, which can be turned into all these wonderful items. And also include information about how cow dung patties can be used as fuel. Ultimately, the cow is very dear to Lord Krishna and is our mother, so you can add that. Just as a mother serves us in this way, we should also reciprocate by caring for her. Moving on to an introspective activity, truthfulness. Can you remember the last time when you may have lied? Write a diary entry explaining why. Now, knowing that it's a bad quality, what would you do if you were in a similar situation again? Another activity about a friend indeed. Think about the places that Kali was able to reside. If you had a friend who came into bad association and became involved in one of those activities, what advice would you give him or her? How would you help your friend? Really nice activity. Draw a mind map illustrating how one of those sinful activities can lead your friend to degradation. Draw a flowchart to show how he or she could benefit by devotional service and avoidance of sinful activities. I'm sorry for the noise behind me. I'm not at home today. A writing activity about a news report. Write a news report about what happened between Dharma the bull, Kali, and Maharaj Pariksha. So read a few short news articles from ISKCON News or Back to Godhead or a newspaper to become familiar. I don't know if anybody reads newspapers anymore, but online newspaper maybe, to become familiar with some of the language techniques news reporters use in their writing, and then use the writing draft to help you plan your report before you start writing. So some very nice pointers given here. That standard features of news articles are an opening paragraph that provides who, what, where, why, when, and how, a nice catchy headline, a quote by someone involved or by a witness. So you want it to be as factual as is possible. The article is written in the past tense, and powerful words are used to portray action. So action words, and a photo with a caption, and then a draft or an outline or a template for a draft is given. And then the child can go ahead and write a story, revise it, proofread it, print it. So this is a really nice writing activity. A diary entry. Imagine that you're either Maharaj Pariksha or the personality of Kali. Write a diary entry describing your encounters with Dharma, the bull. So different ways to get the child to do writing from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Word jumble. This one is a really interesting one, the first one. How are you? Something Maharaj Pariksha. So these are jumbled words, and then the child has to write the unjumbled words. The answers are provided in the answer section. Keywords, to look these up in the dictionary. To learn how to look up words alphabetically. We were just having a discussion yesterday in my family about, the dictionary, and now it's online, and you go online and it gives you, you click on the button, it pronounces the word for you, and it gives you images and gives you so many more related things. But the dictionary has such a charm, just going into the dictionary and actually learning to look up a word alphabetically and to have the patience to do that kind of research rather than just typing it into Google. Here's a cryptogram. The 4 legs of religion. At the top, there's a key. So like number 8 is actually a C and so forth. So the child finds the 4 legs of religion. It's a nice way to learn the 4 legs of religion through a cryptogram. So again, learning the concepts of Bhagavatam in very creative, innovative, child-friendly ways is what the book focuses on. Theatrical activities, we have a couple here. So it's such a nice mix of arts and crafts and theater and writing and introspective activities to bring the chapter to life. Here's a role play. Dress up as a king. We keep a dress-up box, or at least we used to keep a dress-up box. So we have a box where it has all kinds of jewelry and costumes and supplies. And so you go in there and you pick something to dress up as a king. Make crowns and swords and act out the story for chapter 17 while someone reads it. So we had one student read the chapter summary from this book, and then another person did a mime. Talk about how they were dressed, how do we know which was the real king since they look the same, and then discuss what should a real king be like, what is a king's duty or role, what qualities would you need to have to help achieve that. And look up the Bhagavad Gita, qualities of a Kshatriya, and talk about what this means. And this is a really nice book by Vishakha Mataji, our most dear friend, Bhagavad Gita for Children. It's a children's picture book. So if you have that, then look at those pictures of the changing body and the body putting on a coat, and how can we understand that we are the soul and not the body. So, just like you dress up as a king, and then you go back to your dress up box, and you might dress up as a pauper or as just an ordinary citizen. Similarly, we're putting on these dresses, the bodies. A dance, choreograph a dance based upon chapters 16 and 17. You may need to research which genre of dance you would like to perform before you start. Try to bring across the emotions that are being felt by the characters in your movements and facial expressions. We haven't done this one, but I know there are children and that are particularly interested in dance and do Bharatanatyam dancing, and it may be appropriate for them. Here's a nice poem. Maharaj, Parikshit meets Kali. Oh, what a terrible sight to be seen, a man treating a cow and a bull so mean. The cow cried in terror, moo, 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 but King Parikshit came to the rescue. The evil man was full of fear when he saw the king coming so near. King Parikshit spoke gently to the bull, "You're so white and so beautiful." The bull looked like he was in awful pain, then gave a speech about who may be to blame. King Parikshit said, "Whoa, you must be Dharma the bull to give a speech so wonderful. It is the age of quarrel and hypocrisy." And then he pulled out his sword to kill Kali. Seeing him so helpless and surrendering, the king gave him a happy ending. He gave him 5 spaces where he could stay, so from these dangerous places keep far away. Gambling, meat eating, and illicit sex, drinking, and lots of gold all have bad effects. So from these dangerous places keep far away. Stay close to Krishna and be happy always. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And there are answers given to those that. Oh, so that was how. Who are you, roared Maharaj Parikshit? That first one. And via Amazon in the US and UK, and via Golden Age Media in India. Okay, that's all I have. So we're gonna request you to please unmute yourself and ask your questions. And looks like Rati Preshta Mataji from New Delhi would like to ask something.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Thank you very much, Mataji, to both of you for such wonderful classes and association that you are giving us. Mataji, just one brief question I had. Once I was taking I am a teacher, so students also keep on asking me some questions like this. So this one question came in one of the class which I was not able to answer well. Mataji, on the one hand, we say that milk is very pure and it is meant for human beings, like grains, fruits, and milk is a food that is meant for human beings. Here in this chapter also we studied it. And otherwise also milk is most nourishing food. And Mataji, the confusion was like some students were asking, when we say that meat eating is, we should not eat meat because it destroys mercy aspect of the principles of religion. So, but today the way the milk is being taken from cows is also kind of um, meaning. Showing lack of mercy, like you also shared, Mataji, in your presentation, that milk also becomes poison in the way it is taken these days, mechanically by inserting injections onto mother cow. So, meaning it was not, I was not able to explain them that how, milk, drinking milk is not destroying our mercy, what aspect, but being killing animals is actually destroying mercy. So, Mataji, please, if you can explain, put some light on this.
Yeah. So the best is ahimsa milk. In other words, if you can get milk from a farm which is run by devotees, where they actually take care of the cows, without, injecting them with all types of antibiotics and things like that, and also, not sending the cows to the slaughterhouse, that is the best milk. If you can get milk from a farm where the people who are running the farm are following these principles, that is the best milk. And there's provision many places, even in America, people try to get that kind of milk at Gita Nagari, and so that is the best. And then if that's not available, then you try to get the best milk, and offer it to Krishna. In other words, I know during Prabhupada's time, Prabhupada was well aware that how the milk was being how the cows were being treated. And he speaks very heavily against that. As you can see, purport after purport throughout Bhagavatam, he speaks. But yet the devotees were getting the milk, right? They were getting the milk, using it for cooking all types of things for Krishna, So in other words, we pray to Krishna that he will, forgive in terms of supporting these people who are, not treating even the organic cows nicely, in terms of how they ultimately send the cows to the slaughterhouse, even the organic farms, they have better procedures, they have better ways that, for the cows, better living conditions, but yet they are also liable for sin because they're sending these cows to the slaughterhouse, eventually. So what I'm saying is it's good to at least get that kind of milk that is, free from antibiotics and all that mistreatment of the cows, and then offer it to Krishna. And this way Krishna, protects. Yeah. I mean, Radhika, if you have anything to add to that? Yeah.
No, I don't. Thank you. Those are
Yeah.
comprehensive.
So what happens with and I know a lot of people they become vegans due to this thing, due to this, the way they treat even the cows who are in an organic farm, and they feel that very strongly because ultimately these are materialists and they have no such feeling that these cows need to naturally be protected and naturally get old and die. Not that you send them to slaughterhouses. However, the problem with that could be, and I know some very wonderful devotees who are vegans. So this is a personal choice, basically, of how a person feels, and I don't like to get in that way of personal choice. It's just that when a person goes to, especially a young, somebody who's already matured and who's on the very high platform of spiritual life, for that person to become a vegan, I don't see any problem because that person has reached that state, and mostly they will, a lot of these people will drink ahimsa milk, but not the milk bought from outside. So I respect that. But for young people who are entering Krishna consciousness as young people who are trying to advance in Krishna consciousness, for them to become vegans will be very difficult. And I personally don't feel that is good for them because they miss out on all the prasadam that's which becomes the very basis for advancement for them, all the wonderful Sunday feasts and all those paneer and all those things being cooked in the temples. And what happens that over time they become very bitter then because they're not able to enjoy those things because the senses are demanding them. So they become very critical of other devotees. And I've seen that in cases myself, having been in a temple and all that for many, many years. I see that, and it's very unfortunate because ultimately one will become very critical of other devotees who are enjoying those things. But with time, if somebody over time, through a lot of advancement, comes to that realization that he actually is not going to do that, then that's, one can understand and really respect that. But growing up in Krishna consciousness is going to be a big struggle, and that's why in all temples even today, they have all types of dairy, right? And they are doing that freely and distributing that prasad. So this is how I feel, just with my own experience. Yeah. But everybody is welcome, has their opinion about it. And I totally respect that, so.
Thank you. Thank you for a nice question, Radha Krishna Mataji. It's nice to see you. We've been, you're doing a wonderful program and teaching from the book, and thank you for being part of this.
Subhadra wants to thank both of you for your wonderful association.
Thank you. Yeah, she's such a wonderful girl. I've seen her pictures of writing poems and all that. Yeah,
She really enjoys Bhagavatam Mataji. This book, she never sleeps without. And she will force me, even if I am tired, she will force me to read before she goes to bed.
Yeah, these children have been raised with such wonderful association, and you're doing a great job. Now inviting other people, other children, to share that same joy.
All by your mercy, Mataji. Thank you so much.
This book is created by many, many devotees around the world. I'm just putting it together. Yeah. So we have a lot to be grateful. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mataji.
And another person who's sharing the book in her community very nicely, Shyamarupini Mataji. Thank you for joining us. Go ahead, ask your question first.
Thank you, Matajis, for the wonderful, wonderful presentation. Aruddha Mataji, I had a question regarding.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Mataji. So I had a question regarding, the marriageable age for the girls that you were saying, that Prabhupada says 16. So, during this time and circumstances, it's not that, we want our children to go out, especially girls to go out and work or anything.
Mhm.
But does it mean that, you don't pursue much after, education or, it's a really, I don't know, it's a difficult topic for me to understand and correlate. So can you please throw
Yeah.
light on?
I mean, Prabhupada has given us the ideal, and as times are changing, we have to naturally adjust accordingly. But the principle is there. The principle of protecting our children from outside temptations. That's the part which is important. In other words, that I don't think there's anything wrong in girls getting educated, because boys or girls, education, ultimately we have to train them to use it in Krishna's service. And Prabhupada, you could see that how he engaged women in such wonderful ways, and there was practically no difference in terms of preaching and and running temples and deity worship in America, so all those things Prabhupada himself showed by example that he did not see it on the bodily level, However, just for the sake of this, so that the children don't go through those anxieties early on, he's recommended that, from Shastra, basically, that they should get married. And basically it's to protect them from, going through illicit sex, which is so very much there in society today, right? So how do we protect our children from that? And that's why he recommended marriage. However, in today's time, we are not able to do that because things have changed so drastically, right? So, but we can adopt certain ways, by which the children can, especially girls, can still be protected. We can do so many things by, because this culture is very important. The culture, like we just heard, the Brahmanical culture and this culture really helps in promoting, in keeping our children safe. Children who are raised in this culture of, being encouraged not to intimately associate with the opposite sex, they have a better time, So, I mean, this is how I teach a lot of children, and this is what, and a lot of them are teenagers and things, and they're very much aware of these things. Like I mentioned last time, I think I just openly talk about that, and from the Shastric perspective, and you can't really prevent them from associating with the opposite sex, but you can discourage them from any intimate association. That is very important, because children are going to school and they have to mix in. Even Prabhupada, in one of these purports, he said he's not against co-education. He's not against co-education. He said actually the point that he stressed was that as soon as a boy and a girl want to have more than just more intimate association, they must get married. So Prabhupada was very practical. He knew that the times will change and children will mix freely with the opposite children, opposite sex. But he said, as soon as you see this intimacy, first of all, they should be discouraged, and if they do, then immediately get them married, because it's important that. So I tell the children that you should control any intimate association, because you'll end up getting seriously, you'll regret. And Prabhupada, in terms of training, he said between the ages of 10 and 15 you have to be strict as a tiger, Prabhupada said. For different ages, he recommended different ways of training. But after 15, 16, he said, you should become their friend. You see? So that period between 10 to 15 is very troublesome. You see? And we have to watch over our kids just so they don't make the wrong decision. It's not like we are restricting them. It just means that they are getting good training and a good understanding. That is why Shastra education is so important. Because when they see it from the perspective of Bhagavatam, they understand. There's so many good examples both ways. People who didn't follow religious principles, people who did follow, So this way they learn. Okay, this topic can go on and on for a long time. I don't want to do all the time. Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Mataji. That really helps. Thank you so much.
Okay, Satyamataji, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, Hare Krishna. I wanted to thank you for all your help. I just, to Mother Aruddha, I really appreciate everything what you're doing. I wanted to only say, to give a little bit of report, because maybe if you remember in the very beginning, I mentioned my son, our son, he's 11 now, and he didn't really want to do any reading Srimad Bhagavatam, anything, but I keep doing this video. I'm just trying to read, and recently he agreed that we will do a little bit of reading together, first chapter, and then we even started the activity book. He was very happy actually to start. Before he was to tell me, I don't want to do anything, but now he is happy to do it. And yesterday he was doing his own word search and from the templates, and he did quite a few things. And I just wanted to say that it's due to your great help and Krishna's mercy, because how he's helping through your service, amazing service. And I just wanted to ask, what should I remember not to make mistakes? Some mistakes. If we started like that, if you would have anything to do, I should always remember not to avoid to do some basic mistakes I could do to discourage him or something like that. If you could give me just some from your experience, how can we continue? Because he seems to be happy to do a little bit of reading. We read only the verse, the translation, and like that, like you saying. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Satyamataji. It's so nice to hear from you, and really encouraging to know that how you kept on working on this, and now he's agreed. So this is, you can see that's only because of your sincere effort to try to make it work, and how Krishna responded to your sincere effort. Now, in terms of the precautions, well, I think as a mother, you know the heart of your child, and you know how to there has to be a balance of in terms of giving him freedom to think and be able to think for himself, and that encourages him to ask questions because he feels that freedom from you where he's able to express. But then also logically, rationally going through everything and making the point very firmly, how in terms of the Vedic conclusion, and that can be done by reading Srila Prabhupada's purport, when there is a doubt, where you try to convince him through Shastra that how this is the way to see it, so find balance, you see, a fine balance of, so because a child also needs training, in terms of how to think logically and in the proper way, but at the same time, the inquiry has to be there, the freedom of inquiry. We don't want to smash it, that need for curiosity and need for inquiry and to express doubts, so those doubts must be answered in a very logical, empathetically way by which he can understand that what my mother is saying is makes sense, like that.
Okay, so it would be fine to sometimes. I remember you mentioned that sometimes to read the purports with him as well. Or I know I should always study them beforehand, but sometimes it's okay to read as well, isn't it, for the child to explain something more detailed?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. For you to explain or for the child to explain?
No, for me to explain
Oh yeah.
through Srila Prabhupada's purport. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. I've noticed in my own life. It's just you are able to understand for yourself what this whole thing means, and to be able to go deeper will give him more satisfaction, because you would have been able to do that through the help of Srila Prabhupada. You see, so even if you're not able to read all the purports, I would suggest read at least a few. If you don't have time to read all of them, but discuss, at least read a few, and just you can note down the ones you want to discuss with him. So read the purpose of those, just a few.
Okay,
Yeah.
but it means you say that with his age, he's 11, it would be okay to read all the purports, or
Not with him, not with him.
yeah, for myself. Oh, definitely. Yeah,
Yes.
I understand now.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
have a grandson who's going to be 11 very soon in June.
Hmm.
I know
Okay.
that age is really curious. It's a very
Yeah.
age of curiosity, and they need to have answers, and they need to feel the freedom to be able to express those doubts, feel confident that if I express my doubts, I won't be seen in a bad light, or something like that. He's not going to worry. He shouldn't worry about speaking openly to you. And you should feel confident that you can help him.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
All right, we have a few minutes remaining. I'd like to call upon Adi Gaurangi Mataji. Please ask the question.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Sandhavad Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for another wonderful session. I had a question and I just had something to share. I'll just share quickly. I'm teaching 12 to 14-year-olds in Sunday school class. And we originally, before your classes started, Mataji, I was just teaching them from the book and we were reading the story summaries. So we went through the chapters in Canto 1 pretty quickly. And now we've gone back and started actually reading the Bhagavatam and then select purports based on the higher thinking questions. So I didn't do any activities for chapter 7, which is where we are now. We had done them previously, but I do like to usually reinforce, instead of giving tests, like do games. So just a suggestion and just something to share is my class really likes the Jeopardy games. And this time my son wanted to do it. It takes time to put together and I didn't have time. So I had him put it together. So he did that for chapter 7 with categories of like Ashwatthama and Draupadi. He had random just Pandavas and general Mahabharata questions as well. So he put the whole thing together and ran it in our class, and it was very good. He gave the kids time in the beginning. He wanted to make it challenging, so he gave them time in the beginning and said, study the children's guide, read the story summaries, and he made questions from the higher thinking and the story summary and what we discussed in Bhagavatam. So I thought it was a very nice way for him. And what I'll do in each future chapter is probably have each child take turn to put together like a Jeopardy game so that we can review the chapter and see if the understanding is there. So I just wanted to share that.
This is so wonderful. How wonderfully you're, having him do all these things. And he's feeling probably a sense of pride in, being able to do that. Radhika, did you want to say anything on this?
And then my question, Mataji, for you was, we had been discussing in general, just with my daughters, I think, about Dharma and the cow and the 4 pillars. And she had asked, which I didn't know the answer to, but the cow is now on just the one leg, which is truthfulness. So in each yuga, did she lose one leg? And do you know which leg it was in each yuga? I could not answer.
I know that in each yuga, one quality goes down more and more.
Okay.
And I'm not sure. I'm not sure on that, which one goes when,
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that.
Yes, happen.
I can definitely get to it and let you know.
If you come across the answer, thank you, Mataji.
Yes, I will do that. Definitely. Wonderful job, Gorangi. So happy that you're doing so well with the Bhagavatam guidebooks. And
thank you for these classes, and of course for your wonderful book that you've compiled. It's very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing any further questions. Oh, all right. One last one. Couple of minutes from Archana Mataji.
Oh,
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mataji, I was just curious on the purpose when Srila Prabhupada says, gambling of any sort is like contempt, like, it's degrading, even business enterprises. And is it because in this age, truthfulness is the only pillar that we have to safeguard, or just continuing to Radhika Rangi Mataji's question, sometimes even I wonder how truthfulness is prevailing in these times. But can you just throw some light on that too?
yeah. That's the only quality that's still you can see some semblance of that, and I so that also, and that's why Prabhupada is stressing gambling and stock markets and all that, which is basically speculation, and encourages people to get things without working for it, for free. And so that naturally means that if we can avoid those types of gambling, society can keep that element of truthfulness here intact. But the basic point is that, due to the Lord Chaitanya's mercy, we are trying, the society, ISKCON is trying to bring all these four qualities back. That's the basic thing we have to understand, is that everything is diminishing. Even in America, where we are, where I live, is you can see even the last element, truthfulness, is going. Because I remember 40 years ago when I first came here, I could see that people were generally very truthful. That was one thing I could really actually see. And now 40 years later, I see it's fast disappearing, right? So what I'm saying is that ultimately all these qualities are going to vanish, but Lord Chaitanya came in this yuga, and he brought us this wonderful, process. So, and it's predicted that, with ISKCON being here, then the next 10,000 years, the idea is that these principles will come back, will actually come back due to the, so that's the optimistic side, is that these principles, just like Parikshit Maharaj, he brought it back, So here collectively, ISKCON can actually bring these, in other words, we don't feel the effects of Kali Yuga as much when we, follow this process of Lord Chaitanya, and we can stem it. So that's the main thing that we have to stress. There's still some semblance of truthfulness left, but, how much, right? How much, So that's the main point I was thinking to be stressed, to have faith.
Thank you.
To give our children that positive faith that actually devotees can, bring these principles back, and devotees can become leaders in society. Prabhupada says that there will come a day when devotees will be able to control these things.
Thank you, Mataji.
So Radhika, I want to mention about this message of Radhika from from the Middle East, and if she can get in touch with me, please, and in terms of training these teachers.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Sure, Mataji. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, just get in touch with me, because I'm available on WhatsApp, and you can just get in touch with me in terms of, training the teachers that you suggested. 18 teachers.
Okay, Mataji. Sure, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji.
I'd be happy. Yeah. Okay. So, Hare Krishna, she may, I think she could be disconnected from us. Radhika? Okay, anyway, I think it's time and we can stop now. And thank you, Archana, for your nice question, and all of you for your nice questions. It really enlivens me when I hear from you. Thank you.